Thank you, Samana. Amnesty International is calling on Biden administration to shut down Guantanamo Bay prison. Well, we have heard that after a while now, but it is still there. President Biden wanted to shut it down, but he couldn't do that. Will President Biden be able to do that? So, from Amnesty International, we have its USA Director of Security with Human Rights, Daphne Eviatar. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us, what's the reason for this for the fresh call?
For the fresh call to close Guantanamo?
Yes.
Well, Guantanamo has been open almost 20 years. So it's been a human rights atrocity since the beginning, and it continues to be. We've been calling for Guantanamo to be closed since it was opened, because it's completely unlawful to have an offshore prison that is designed specifically to hold Muslim men accused of crimes of terrorism without any charge or trial. So that's what it was created for. It was created to be outside the law. It stayed outside of the law in terms of any reasonable legal procedure that provides due process. And so we're calling for it to be closed. We are hopeful that we finally have an administration who will be willing to close it. And we're beginning to see slow steps, such as the first transfer of a detainee out of there in a long time. But it's not quickly enough. We need to see the other remaining detainees being transferred out quickly.
So Abdul Latif Nasser, who has been transferred to Morocco as a free person, he was set to be released in 2016. He was cleared by what, 6-7 agencies? Why then he was unable to be released?
You know, we don't really know. I mean, that's the thing. There's no transparency in this system. We know that during the Obama administration, he did arrange for several people to be released, and then it didn't happen. Tawfiq al-Bahani is another example, who was supposed to go to Saudi Arabia. It just didn't happen. And then when Donald Trump came in and took office, he said nobody's going to be transferred out of there. It was purely politics. He decided to make himself look tough and to make himself to kind of bow to his constituents, his extremist constituents. He said no one's going to be transferred. It had nothing to do with justice. It was completely politics.
How many people are still there after the release of Mr. Nasser?
So now there are 39 men who remain there. And of those, 10 have been cleared for release. 10 have already been cleared for transfer, some for more than 10 years, and they're still there.
So there are others who have been cleared even before Mr. Nasser, and they're still there. Why? Any idea?
Again, it's politics. Some of it, sometimes there are logistical difficulties, challenges. For example, if someone is from Yemen, the US government has not wanted to return people to Yemen because of security concerns. But those are concerns that all can be overcome. They can be returned, they can be sent to another country that could accept them under conditions where they will be safe there. There are all sorts of arrangements that can be made and then have been made. I mean, keep in mind, there have been about 750 different people who've been through the prison over time. And majority of them were transferred out by the Bush administration, over 500. So there are all sorts of arrangements that can be made. Some of the ones that are remaining there have been tortured by the US government, particularly by the CIA. And so the US is afraid to release them for various reasons. But I think there are no actual obstacles. Mostly this is just politics.
So Daphne, you mentioned there are originally 750 people who are detained. How many were actually tried?
Almost none. There have been 8 people charged in the proceedings. I think I don't remember the exact number where there have been convictions. I know that most of the convictions that there were overturned, but there are fewer. It's a handful. So the vast majority of them were never tried. The vast majority were never even charged. And the military commission system has been so dysfunctional. There's never been a full-fledged trial in a case. So there have been some plea agreements, some kind of under the radar agreements that were made, but the vast majority have never even been charged.
You mentioned that illegal, you used the term illegal. Illegal under which law?
Under international law. The United States government, of course, says it's legal. They say it's legal under the laws of war because they say this is part of an international non-international armed conflict. But there's no armed conflict under international law that goes on for 20 years and with a constantly different set of enemies, of declared enemies by the United States. The United States keeps changing who it's fighting. The authorization for use of military force, so the beginning of this so-called war, started when the United States invaded Afghanistan. That was quite a long time ago. That was in 2001. The nature of the conflict that the US is fighting has changed dramatically over time. This is not the same conflict that we're still in. And of course, we're withdrawing our troops from Afghanistan. But the US government continues to maintain that this is an ongoing war, which they themselves say could last 100 years. So it's sort of a farce. Under international law does not conceive of, it was not created to address the idea of a war that goes on for 100 years. It was talking about wars that go on for a discrete period of time in a discrete geographic location.
Has anyone in the United States tried to use the legal means in the United States to get the Guantanamo Bay closed or challenge the legality of it?
There have been legal processes in the United States that have been brought. They tend to get stuck in the court system. The US court system defers a great deal to the government when it comes to US national security law and policy. So it's very difficult to pursue these cases in the US court system. But there have been cases, and there are still cases pending, but it's very unlikely that the US court system will rule against the US government on this larger question of the legality of Guantanamo.
Now, considering the gentleman Abdul Latif Nasser, who has been just released to Morocco for freedom, who was never charged, who was never tried, who was cleared by all the agencies 6 years ago and was still not released. Reading his detail, it turns out some Afghans, bounty hunter, detained him and sold it to the United States. Now, as Afghan war is coming to close, United States is about to bring tens of thousands of those people who helped the United States. Do you think some of the bounty hunters going to show up here as well?
I don't know. You know, the whole bounty hunter idea was done in a sort of under the radar sense. It was an unofficial agreement with the Afghans to say, give us anyone you suspect of being involved in terrorist activity, which is obviously not a legitimate way of conducting law enforcement, right? So, you know, I think that the US government is trying to bring people here who it wants to protect because those people help the United States and put themselves at risk. But the whole concept where the United States government was paying people money to turn over their enemies, basically, without really any sense of whether those people were actually enemies of the United States or maybe just someone that person had a personal grudge against. It was a nonsensical way of going about it, and it's certainly not a cause for continued detention of anyone after so many years.
Do you really expect Biden administration to actually shut it down, considering that his former boss, President Obama, also tried, decided, and announced, but was unable to do that?
I do hope that they plan to shut it down. I do think that that is the intention. I think the Biden administration did not come in and make a big announcement the way that President Obama did, because it did not want to encourage a backlash among Republicans and conservatives in this country who, for purely political reasons, want to keep Guantanamo open. So I think it's trying to do some of this under the radar in a sense and make a less of a big deal out of it so that it can do it more quietly. At least I hope. I'm trying to be hopeful here that they are taking it very seriously and they're trying to close down the prison. I know they believe it should be closed down. The question is politics, and are they willing to push and take a political risk to do it? And this is absolutely the time to do it, and they have the support in Congress right now.
Definitely, these people were, almost all of them were non-US citizens, so we kept them outside the United States technically, although that land belonged to the US in one way or the other. But within the United States, there is a law of the indefinite detention of the US citizens, which President Obama signed into law, saying that my administration will not implement, but he did sign into law. That law still exists. Is there some awareness about that?
Can you be more specific about which law you're referring to in terms of indefinite detention in the United States?
Yes, there was NDAA during the Obama administration, in which a insertion was of a law that the United States government is authorized to detain any US citizen indefinitely if they suspect them of this or that or whatever it is, but about the US citizen. So President Obama signed that, but while signing, he put a note with his pen that my administration will not implement it, instead of vetoing, because it was National Defense Authorization Act. And since then, it has been constantly renewed, and it is legal for any US citizen to be detained indefinitely. Maybe the type of evidence which brought those prisoners of Gitmo there could be used against these people. But whenever I mention that, talk to people, not a whole lot of people know that it's a law. I remember a Council on Foreign Relations meeting where I was invited. I mentioned that there were about 4 or 5 lawyers in that group of 20, 30 people. They said, well, never heard of it. But it is the law. It was signed into law by President Obama, saying that his administration will not implement. To my knowledge, probably it has not been implemented, but that remains a law.
Yeah. One of the challenges of the way the laws are made here, and particularly around the military, so the National Defense Authorization Act, it's an enormous bill, and nobody ever actually reads the whole thing. So a lot of things get slipped in there that people don't realize are in there. So I think if this law were to start being enforced, you would certainly see a lot of challenges to it. If it hasn't been enforced, that might be why we haven't seen the controversy yet.
Thank you so much, Daphne Eviatar. Maybe next time I will ask you a question. If you have a wish list on behalf of Amnesty International, when some bill like 600 pages is being passed, you like to insert in there?
We do. We absolutely do. And we do our best to get those provisions in there. Once in a while, we can be a little bit successful on some of them. But, there are advantages and disadvantages to having a law like that. And it gets passed every year, almost regardless. So it's an opportunity to try to get some good provisions in there. But it also means that sometimes things end up in there that don't make any sense at all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your interest.
Back to you, Samana.